Hola, it's Joe Partavilla, and bad things happen to a lot of good people. And joining me today is someone who has dedicated his life to stopping bad things before they happen. He is the CEO, founder, and connecting the dots officer at Awareity, a provider of incident management and prevention software platforms. His name is Rick Shaw. Hey, Rick, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good, Rick. Thanks for asking. So I'm going to ask you a super complicated yet super easy question. Why does Awareity exist?
It exists primarily because when I first started my first company, I was a white hat hacker. And everything came down to awareness and accountability and a whole bunch of other idiots, security and accountability and all that kind of stuff. So I decided that we needed to focus on awareness and accountability and solutions that focused in that area. So that's how we came about.
And as a white hat hacker, those are people, essentially for folks who aren't familiar, those are the good guy hackers. Those are the guys you sort of stop cyber crimes and such, right?
Exactly. Yeah. We were hired to come in and look for the holes, to find the holes before the bad guys find the holes. And so we can plug those up and keep the bad guys out.
So you saw this opening and you created Awareity. What do you guys basically do? What does the company in a nutshell do?
Well, initially we started off being mostly focused on information security. So we still do that today, where we focus on, with all the ransomware and everything that's going crazy out there these days, it really comes down to one person not being aware. And now ransomware is inside your organization, and it's pretty costly. So we still focus on that, but we also evolved into a platform where we focus on prevention. My passion for child safety is really what drove that. And then Columbine happened in 1999, 9/11 happened in 2001, and then we were kind of off and running on how do we start preventing these things.
And so, if you go to the website, awareity.com, you mentioned the future of safer schools, workplaces, and communities. So if, say, I'm running a company, why would I need Awareity? Say I've got an office of about 50 people. I'm in an office park in the middle of Colorado. Why would I need Awareity?
Well, every organization faces a lot of the same challenges, no matter your size or where you're located. For example, cybersecurity. We briefly talked about that. That's an issue that we all face. Whether you're a company of 50 or 5,000 or 50,000, you're probably a target of some sort of phishing or ransomware. So using some of our information security awareness, is one of the things that we can help that organization with. The other one is when you start getting into the prevention side of things like workplace violence. And these days, because of COVID, it's even worse. You've got a lot of stressors going on and that can impact your employees, whether that's because of work or because of things going on in the community. And so whether it's workplace violence or if it's people who are just stressed out, you've got to be aware of these at-risk individuals. And our platform and our strategies are all about helping organizations to identify these risks and these threats and to actually see them, see the pre-incident indicators and things like that so that you can take action before something escalates. And there's other things too. I mean, there's things like harassment and compliance and all kinds of other things that organizations have to deal with these days.
So in a way, it's your company is a one-stop shop of safety, because not only is it covering the cyber aspect of it, but it's also handling the face-to-face and everyday kind of safety issues that may arise in a workplace.
That's correct. I mean, whether it's cyber or physical safety, things like along those lines, there's almost always pre-incident indicators. We've seen it over and over again. Everybody has in the headlines. We missed the warning signs or missed the red flags. I mean, we see those headlines just over and over and over. I think people have become numb to it a little bit. But the idea is that if you have the right strategies and tools in place, it helps you to identify those pre-incident indicators, whether it's the phishing email that comes in. And instead of somebody just deleting it, which is not a bad thing, an employee just deleting it, they might tell someone so that now the word can be put out to the rest of the organization. Hey, to be on the lookout for this XYZ phishing email. Well, now you just prevented hopefully someone who was busy, wasn't thinking, whatever, from clicking on that. Same goes with harassment or sexual harassment or workplace violence or other things like that. Is there are indicators. And if we can get people to go ahead and when they observe them to report them so that they are automatically routed to the right people who can then actually see the bigger picture, that's how actions can be taken.
And without revealing any corporate secrets or internal protocols, how did you acquire and collect all this data? For example, the indicators or the connecting the dots that you mentioned.
Yeah, good question. I mean, basically, I just started doing research back in around 1999, probably after Columbine, because I had a daughter in school, not in Columbine, but in school. And as a concerned parent, but also as someone very focused on preventing bad things from happening, I started looking at these post incident reports. Most incidents and tragedies come out with those, but most people don't maybe read them very much. Some of them are 250 pages long and they get kind of boring at times, but that's where the lessons learned are, and that's what I try to do is to look for those common gaps, silos, and disconnects, or the profile of a failed prevention. And once we identified the profile of a failed prevention, we're able to then start zeroing in on what those gaps, silos, and disconnects are. I call them GSDs, but really trying to figure out how do we get rid of these common ones, because those are the ones that keep showing up over and over again.
It's like your experience as a white hat hacker has prepared you to create a guidebook for IRL in real life. It's funny. Did you ever think about that? It's like I wouldn't be able to accumulate, like you said, all this data and going through 200 pages of a incident report if I didn't have this prior experience of being a hacker.
That's true. Yeah, when I was a white hat hacker, you had to think like a hacker, and you had to sort of think, how would they get in? How would I get into this organization? And what are the common holes to look for? So that's what hackers do. Well, the same idea kind of applies to people who are trying to get away with harassment or sexual harassment or workplace violence or whatever is, or, take it to the higher extreme of terrorism and things like that. They're looking for holes and gaps so that they can be, first of all, not detected, but also then to execute their plan. They kind of go hand in hand. And you mentioned guidebook. It's funny you should mention that, because today is the day that my book is actually officially released. It's called The First Preventer's Playbook. So yeah, I basically did. I went through and tried to, through all this research, create a playbook for people to follow.
That's amazing. That's a great idea. And what else is in the book as part of your guidebook?
We go into things like, we talk more about those common GSDs, the gap, silos, and disconnects. We also talk about the 6 stages of preventing. The research basically revealed that there are 6 stages to preventing pretty much anything. You have to collect all those indicators, those pre-incident indicators, red flags, warning signs, concerning behaviors, suspicious activities, leakage. There's all kinds of different ways that these pre-incident indicators, they're exhibited and observed. For whatever reason, our society just keeps adding more and more incident reporting options. You've got see something, say something, you got Crime Stoppers, and you've got apps and text and websites and state and local. And I mean, and all we end up doing is keep scattering all of our pre-incident indicators across more silos.
Wow. So these indicators that you mentioned were kind of scattered about in individual reports, whether it's, a school shooting, a domestic violence, drug abuse, harassment. Those were all scattered in different silos until you decided to put them all in one.
Correct. I mean, you think about it, if it's a school, for example, a student might tell a parent, they might tell a trusted adult, a teacher, a counselor, another student, a coach, a bus driver, all those things. And same thing in an organization. It might be a manager, a supervisor, a hotline, a ombudsman, whatever, but they usually, unfortunately, all end up in different places. Sometimes you call law enforcement. Well, law enforcement knows what they know, but then the organization or the school doesn't know what law enforcement knows. I mean, you look at something like Parkland, the school shooting in Parkland, and law enforcement had been to that shooter's house 30 times, but the school did not know it.
Hmm.
Start connecting those dots, the bigger picture becomes much, much clearer. And, people say, well, it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback or whatever you want to call it. But the bottom line is those dots were all sitting out there before. They just weren't connected before. They were connected after. And if we can connect them after, we can connect them before.
Wow, that's great to know. And how does a company like yours sort of toe that line of, I mean, obviously you're doing something ethical, but at the same time when a disaster does happen, when there is a school shooting, how do you then I guess, sell your wares to someone after something like that happens? I mean, do you have to go in with kid gloves? Do you have to worry about people feeling like you might take advantage of the situation? Walk me through that process for you.
Certainly on after the fact, that can be a challenge. There's no doubt about it. That's a good question, and it's a concern we have. We don't want to be, I guess the term is an ambulance chaser or something like that. But at the same time, there's 6 stages to recovery also. And that is, the sooner you start collecting the dots and the sooner you start putting all the pieces together, the sooner you can deal with some of the lawsuits, some of the tragedy, some of the recovering, the healing, all kinds of things. So yeah, there's potentially that little bit of pushback in some places, but otherwise, what we're really trying to do is, certainly we'll go in after a tragedy, but we mostly try to go into people and say, look at all of these different examples where these things that you maybe lucked out on or had a near miss on, that you were able to stop it at the last minute, whatever that it was. What if you could see all these things before and take action before? So we're trying to address it from both sides.
It's funny. The one thing you have to do is you have to sort of toe the line, the same line that gun advocates toe, because you never hear about gun control or hear about school shootings until one happens. And then all of a sudden, when they do pipe up and say, "Hey, we need control, we need to do something about it," they're like, "Well, now's not the time to talk about this." But now there's obviously no school shootings and no one's talking about it. There is that catch-22 to that whole aspect of it.
Yeah, there is. We don't get involved really on the gun control side of things at all because we're really about the people.
Oh yeah,
You
no,
know,
no. What I'm saying, Rick, is the timing of it. Like, when they bring up gun control after a shooting, people say it's too soon to bring that up. And with your company, if you were to approach a school or something after a shooting, they'd be like, "Whoa, we can't. This is too soon." But then if it's not, out of sight, out of mind, if they're not thinking about it, if you go to that school, 2 years from now, you're like, "Oh, okay, it's not really a priority for us right now." That's what I mean by that.
that makes perfect sense. I got you now. Yeah, there's no doubt. If a lot of people who haven't had a problem, it is out of sight, out of mind. They think they have everything under control or whatever. And I'm not saying that nobody has anything under control. I don't mean it that way at all. I'm just saying that you look at someone like Sandy Hook, which was a community that had hardly any violence, and then boom, it only takes one at-risk individual to do a lot of damage. Where I sit today in Las Vegas, you look at what happened on the Strip in October 1 of 2017, and it was terrible. But now there's a lot much more focus, if you will, on security and safety. Sometimes we human beings are very reactive in nature. We just are. It is what it is. So sometimes it takes a tragedy, but we're really trying to work both sides of it to get that proactive part, which is like we call the first preventers, to help the first responders, because first responders respond and first preventers prevent. That's what we're trying to do.
Hmm. And I know you mentioned earlier you don't want to be a Monday morning quarterback, but when you've gone through these incident reports and you've seen the indicators that were mentioned in said report, do you read it and be like, "Oh man, how did they miss all these?" Is there? Do you have like even just like take your businessman perspective out of just the human element of like, how could no one have seen this?
Well, a little bit, but the thing is, I've seen so many of them, and I'm so familiar with the gaps and silos and disconnects that are so common that it's almost like it's obvious because it's sad. Don't get me wrong, but it's so obvious. I can almost, as soon as I start reading some of these reports, I can almost immediately go straight to, I bet they had this, 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 and this. And as I
Hmm.
read further, they had this, 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 and this as far as gaps, silos, and disconnects, because we're all using sort of an old playbook. Okay, I mean we're kind of using the same old playbook that we've used for a long time, and people throw out the term "new normal" now, which I'm not super excited with because I don't want it to be normal. But I mean, we can call it the new reality. Either way, it's new, and so we need some new playbooks, and that's really what I'm seeing out there is that we're kind of stuck in that old playbook, status quo. This is how we do things, and the world has passed it by. And that's the other message we're trying to help people understand is that a new playbook is needed because the same old gaps, silos, and disconnects exist just because of the way we've done things.
And in terms of your company, Awareity, What changes have, to borrow the entrepreneurial term, pivots? What kind of pivots have you either forced or decided to do in relation to the pandemic?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's certainly, I think almost everybody has to pivot at some point. We've had to pivot, like you mentioned, to schools and workplaces as well. If they're working from home, you may not have school violence at the school, or you may not have workplace violence at the workplace, things like that. But the thing is that now at home, you might have domestic violence, you might have child abuse, and we've seen a huge uptick in those kinds of calls and needs. So it's like the violence has shifted to different locations now because of the way things are, the way we're going to school, the way we're working, and things like that. So that has changed, but also on the cyber side, it's changed because when you were at work or at school, you were kind of behind that firewall and the other equipment that the organization had purchased. Well, now you're scattered out and about in your home, and you don't have all those protections. So we've really tried to pivot to help people understand that this remote connectivity thing creates additional challenges, or at least different challenges for them that they need to address.
So for people who want to find out more about you, read your book, The First Preventor's Playbook, can you share any kind of indicators that people should be on the lookout that aren't so obvious to the layman, since you, after your years of experience, your years of research, what are a couple indicators that people can look out for to prevent something bad from happening either at home or in the office?
What I've learned through the research is that most people, we individuals, we as human beings, we have kind of like that gut feeling that tells us when we see something that's suspicious or concerning or whatever. So we see a lot of these things. And again, those could be things like someone posting a picture or posting a comment or making a comment or missing work or missing school or whatever. So we actually see most of those things. The bigger gap these days is that it's just either not getting reported because, oh, hey, I reported it last time and nothing happened, or I don't know where to report it, or I reported at one place and it never got connected with the other stuff. So I mean, the bigger gap right now is how do we bring together all those indicators? People recognize them, and for whatever reason, whether it was a bad experience or they just don't know, or it's confusing, or they did tell someone nothing happened, or whatever. That's really where that biggest gap is right now, Joe, is that we're just not connecting all those things together so that the right people can actually see it. Because I may see something, you may see something, and both of us may think that's not a big deal or too big of a deal. But the two pieces together, plus the other two pieces that came from somebody else, now all of a sudden I've got a trend or a pattern or some sort of a raised level of indicators that this person might need some attention. And it usually comes in the form of helping them. They're usually struggling with something.
Maybe it's something in our collective DNAs where I could be walking down the street with my wife say, we should say something about that. And I'll be like, no, 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 it's fine. What do you think it is? And this could be completely anecdotal, not based on science, but what do you think prevents people from either reporting someone or making a note of something or telling someone about something? What is it about people that just don't want to get involved?
That's a great question. And through the research, we found several things in that area. Number one is most people don't like snitching, or they want to stay out of somebody else's business. Things like that keep us from telling someone.
And that's ingrained from childhood, right? The whole thing of nobody likes a rat, mind your own business. That's the stuff you learn when you're 5 years old. So people can't shake that.
True, it is. And it's like the snitches get stitches.
Right.
Absolutely. So it is something that's ingrained. But what we've done to get around that is we use a butterfly. And you've probably heard the butterfly effect. I mean, there's the scientific version where one small thing can change the universe, and la-di-da-di-da. But what we're talking about, the butterfly effect, is one small indicator can save a person's life or a friend's life or a family member's life, or even just help them save a future, things like that. It may not even be about losing their life, but certainly save their future. Like a kid all of a sudden is looking to join a gang. Okay, well, that's probably not the best decision on that kid's part. But the butterfly effect, and we use this butterfly, and it's sort of like the magic butterfly, meaning that we put the butterfly on like a school website or a business website or a hospital or a whatever, and people can go click that because what they're doing now is they're helping, they're saving, they're working together so that they can actually help protect not only themselves, but others. And it's just a different mentality. And certainly we have to overcome, like you said, the long years of is ingrained in us in an early age. But we've been able to prove and show that when that butterfly goes up, the number of incident reports of concerning behaviors goes way up also. And then the way our platform works, once they tell the butterfly, they don't have to go find the gang person or the bullying person or the workplace violence person or whatever. They just tell the butterfly. The butterfly then on our platform connects all the dots automatically behind the scenes.
That's great. His name is Rick Shaw. He is the CEO and founder of Awareity and the author of the new book, The First Preventor's Playbook, How to Intervene, Disrupt, and Prevent Tragedy Before It Strikes. Rick Shaw, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joe.
And that concludes another episode of Forbes Books Radio, available for you to listen and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.
This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio. Find out more at ForbesBooksRadio.com.